The memes are back, the memes are back. Who called it a coalition government and not shared Pawar? Ritik, don't go to Himachal for the next 4 years for any film shoot. Karan Johar, you're going to get abused in the parliament now and not on TV channels. Smriti ji, I think you've now discovered कि रिश्तों के भी रूप बदलते हैं. What could have been the celebration of democracy for 1.4 billion Indians has turned into a meme fest, drama, and here we are picking out the consequences of all the messages emanating from the general elections in India in 2024. This is Shoaib. I have with me Meenal, Anirudh and Mayur. Welcome to season 2 of Consequence of a Message. Welcome Bhagwat.
Welcome, Sheikh.
Welcome D. Rosario.
Hi, Shoaib.
Welcome Milan.
Hi, Shoaib.
What a past 2 months, yeah?
What is happening?
Uh, it went down to the final over,
Yeah.
not the IPL, the elections, I mean, right? And we're recording this at 24 hours after the results were announced. And I don't know if we can say with confidence if the drama has fully subsided.
Picture अभी बाकी है मेरे दोस्त.
Picture अभी बाकी हो सकती है या part 2 भी आ सकती है, maybe a sequel. When we started this election, I don't think that there was, in recent memory at least, such a one-sided fight, in my opinion. David versus Goliath, somebody who'd gotten 300 plus seats last time and was very clear about their identity politics and the ideology that they wanted to spread through the country. I think half of the opposition had given up hope before a single ballot was even cast. The media had written them off. And in the heart of heart, even their best believers would have probably not expected a result like this. So what we're seeing now, especially after the euphoria of the exit polls, I think that this could be labeled as one of the biggest upsets in Indian political history. And I don't say that frivolously because we've had many examples in the past where the audience has delivered a very strong message through the power of their vote. And I thought that deserved a very deep dive. So even if maybe all the facts are not in front of us at this time while we're recording, I think there's some fantastic takeaways from the 2 months of the elections. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I think you used a very good term, upset, one of the biggest upset. And we are using a term upset even though they've won, right? They're going to form the third, the government for the third time. Then why does it feel like an upset? Right? Why does it feel like they didn't win? Because they did, right? The biggest moment for me in this last 24 hours was when the message popped up in my phone saying they lost in Ayodhya.
Yeah.
Right? Because that itself was such a big message. And I think the eminence of all this conversation about the memes that we've seen on Twitter, the conversation about how can we grapple with democracy when it was a one-way fight. About 5 months ago, there was a fight between the other alliance, about who's going to be the prime minister if they actually won, and people walked out. There was no fight, and then somehow we've as Shoaib said, went into last over. And I feel all of this comes from the sheer overconfidence, bordering on arrogance of the ruling party, going out making statements like, we're going to make 400, it's going to happen, it's a guarantee. All the terms that were used kind of makes it feel like, oh, it was a Chinese guarantee.
But I have a point on this, right? And had it been any other platform, had it been, you used a sports example, so I'll use a sports example. A long time ago, in the NBA, one of the players was asked they were down in the series, and he was asked saying, "Do you think you'll win the next game?" And the player very disturbedly said, "Like, what do you think I'm going to say? No." we're going to lose the next game and go home, right?
Why
So,
bother?
yeah, like of course we're going to win. And with sports and athletes, when they're interviewed pre-game, a lot of them make tall claims. We're going to win the championship this year. We're going to win. Yeah, we're so much better than this team, and often it fails, and they don't get the type of treatment of this loss or this type of perception. But often in a larger scale, like what we have today, it's still seen as something that is spoken about. So how come? I mean, and probably you guys watch so much sports, you would respect an athlete for being
Actually,
confident.
actually, that's the word you use, which is very important, right? Respect in sports versus what respect we have in politics today, right? And that's
It's the
exactly
context.
right.
It's the context.
That's the difference, because when you go out to win the championship, yes, you walk in to win, but you respect the others who are there, right? On your day or on their day, you can be beat.
I just wanted to get your thought on the organizational message side, right? And we have these two parties, there's two alliances, the ND on one side and India Alliance on the other. And if you could distill down the core message, the one party says this time 400 is a given. There's no way we are going beneath that. Mayur said borders on downright arrogance. Basically gives them the mandate to bring in any reform, change in the constitution, any bylaws once they're occupying 400 plus seats. The other side actually dealt them a reverse Uno, and he started carrying a Constitution of India book in his hand in every rally, saying, you know why they want the 400, so that they can change this. And for a while, I didn't think it would work, because when you're talking about the distressed voter who made the difference in this election, they need their basics. So I wasn't so sure they'd pick up on, really, that's the book we're saving, that's why they deserve our vote. But it seems to have struck a chord, which is the difference between the truth of the sender and the receiver.
We've been so conditioned to actually live in this era of post-truth that some part of us started to believe that narrative so much so that we forgot what was the core foundation we started with. And I'm so happy and delighted that actually the truth mattered more than actually the narrative, which has been completely constructed to brainwash us in a certain narrative. So somewhere I think the preference the audience is making or the voters have made is very exciting, that they're actually being conscious that, okay, we know that he is the person who's going to win the next era, but we are also open to the idea of someone being, taking the responsibility, because this narrative is definitely not working for us. So I think in the realm of democracy, somewhere I'm very hopeful that I think people are making a conscious effort of choice. This is their first step towards it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beautiful part of what I have taken away from this particular episode.
But this is not the first time that's happened. This has happened so many times in history. Often what is, in terms of proximity, what has just happened is something that stands out for us. Herbert Hoover, 1928, says, chicken in every pot, car in every garage. That's his promise for elections. And then walks directly into the Great Depression, right? So the challenges that come with being a leader are, at times you have to take a risk. And I'm not here to support anybody or say anything. I'm here really to talk about what this podcast is about, is consequence of the message. And sometimes there are consequences of a message. In fact, weirdly, we just came from our AGM where we are talking about leadership accountability, right? What happens to a leader when it's accountable? Read my lips. I'm kidding. Read my lips. There'll be no more taxes. George Bush said this in 1998, right? In 2000, he signs a reform to actually bring back taxes. He loses the next election. And people have found that that's probably one of the reasons he lost, because he made a promise and he literally went against it, right? Sure. And I've seen that politics is a different arena than most other parts of our life, like business and sports. In business, CEOs get fired for accountability or because they are accountable. In sports, you try harder next year. What happens in politics? And the question now back to you is, it's happened. They've still won, and congratulations to them. But they made a tall claim, and in a way, they kind of shot themselves in the foot, because had they not, the victory could have just been celebrated. They won. It's like a team saying we're going to win by 40 and wins by 1. Had they not said anything, they still won. So are you still going to throw the parade? And what's the consequence?
So you spoke about consequence in political sense, right? And let's see how the democracy and how our parliament works. You need 272 votes as a midpoint of you being able to pass anything. The first election that happened in 2014,
Yeah.
they had majority. Second election, they had 300 plus, so they had majority
Better
by
majority.
themselves.
Yeah.
By themselves. Yeah.
This time they don't.
Mm.
So now, if they have to pass something, they are dependent. And that's the consequence of this election, right? From being outright in control, being dependent on making decisions. That's the consequence that we face in politics. Because, Shoaib was saying, why is Abki Baar 400 Paar was such a message which was being delivered? Was look at the context of the second term. What we did in Jammu and Kashmir, right, wrong, that's for them to figure out. But they were able to do that because they had that many, that much number. There were so many other reforms that they want to implement, but they can't do now because they don't have that number.
Or they may not be able to do.
Or they may not.
Or it might be slower progress.
Or
towards
it might be a slow progress, right? And that kind of derails you from your overall narrative building, right? I read a very interesting article in it was on one of the international news channels, of course. Is India gravitating towards a single party democracy? Like
No.
well, thankfully, and that's what the current election has thrown up.
Yeah.
But we were moving towards what we have in China, and there's just Communist Party. There is election, and they win every time around, and we were moving towards that. And it's such a stark reminder to everyone. And I think truly using sports analogy and using our favorite commentator Ravi Shastri, who says today cricket won. After every game he says cricket won. I think people of India truly won this election.
Awesome.
Because if this hadn't happened, there were dark times.
We spoke about organizational accountability of leadership. Here's the challenge that happens when a message like this is delivered from the audience, is that you've run a campaign where every striking promotional visual has unfortunately been condensed down to make one man look larger than life. And at the end of the election, you're now faced with the prospect of joining hands with a few coalition members, but you never gave them any opportunity, any limelight, any visibility in the run-up to the campaign. But now you're forced to go back, and you're forced to talk to the same people, saying, "Hey, but I think this partnership is going to work." Their demands to make this happen are going to be through the roof because they know they're kingmakers now, and this is not a challenge, as much of a challenge, a visibility challenge for the other alliance, because by nature, from day one, of course, there's going to be confusing messaging coming out from there as well. But when you make it about one thing, you better not miss, because now that you've missed, you end up compromising yourself.
To kind of continue what you're saying, sure. In my mind, I think we've always been of the thought process that, deliver more. And, at this point in time, I'm kind of, how bad is this statement or how this promise, and anybody can make a promise. Leaders can, so can, enterprises. But what does it really do from an expectation level is where I am starting to think about it. And promise, which is so tall, is also needs to be backed by actions. I think that's where I am sort of getting a little confused, that are we concentrating more on the tall claims because we have these multiple channels to voice our opinions, and kind of lowering the effort towards the action and not talking about that as much. So somewhere, while we are marketers, I myself as a marketer tend to think that, aren't we speaking too much on too many channels and focusing lesser on the actual action. I think the population talks about, unemployment and younger generation not necessarily, getting the jobs they should be getting. But that's a very big aspect which we need to start thinking as a generation who is going to make choices and preferences. That should our narrative focus on action more or tall claims?
But I think whether it is action or not, and I think, look, every leader will back up with some kind of action. It may work, it may not work. But with every big promise and every not reaching that promise, what happens is, one, you start losing control. This happens in business, this happens in sports, it definitely happens in politics. You explained how.
Yeah.
Even in sports, your teammates don't trust you as much when you're telling them. They don't look up to you in that way. In business, you start getting different filters start being put in. So before you start taking this, no, we are going to have this committee look at you and this committee look at you because we're not trusting your decision making. And that leads to lack of trust, right? So the question is it bad to make tall promises? I don't think so. Sorry, I know you said, but you know why I don't think so? It is a very strong message for a leader of an organization or any entity to be so tightly wound in the vision that they have, that they believe it so much, that they're so confident that we are going to get there and this is what's going to happen. But it comes with two big disclaimers. And this is what we need to learn from a messaging perspective. First disclaimer is, make sure you've done a good understanding of the external factors that may change the course of that happening. Second, make tall claims largely about what you can control, not what others can control. Because now you've not only put yourself at big risk of making a tall claim, but you have absolutely no control in the outcome of that claim.
Anirudh, I think, I need to kind of make this a little clearer. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. I think when you're making a confident claim, you are actually pretty clear in terms of what you're backing with, right? When it goes away from the boundary of confidence to arrogance, then it starts to kind of look a little uncomfortable. I think I'm questioning the leaders of today. Are they getting arrogant or they're being confident?
So that's the thing, right? And it's you're right. I don't disagree. There's a strong line between confidence and arrogance, and that plays into culture and people around you and all of that. What I'm saying is, I'm talking from a lens of saying, be in control of what you can promise, and then try hard to get there. So at least when you don't get there, you know it's on you.
So, both of you used a couple of things, and I'm going to pick that. You talked about generation and how we want to look at it, how are we going to react to it. And you talked about leaders and organizations being confident to make make a statement and then following through. You brought back confidence, borders on arrogance. It happens in sports also, and that's why we've seen dynasties fall, sports dynasties fall. But there's a term that we use in communication, and that's part of our vision statement as well, is authenticity.
Yeah.
Right? At times when you're confident, you become arrogant when when you start moving away from being authentic. And that's why I'll bring the generation, right? Many of us, irrespective to age and the generation we belong to, we were apolitical before this election actually happened. Didn't give the roots about what's happening in politics. But when you start seeing the entire narrative move away from the authenticity of your reality, then you start taking up, and it's like, don't take me for granted.
It pisses you off.
Yeah. And then you go out, and then I think, like Shoaib said, we don't have the data. And we'll probably not get this data. I want to really find out how many apolitical people actually went out and voted and said, stop this bullshit. Right? And I think that's a very important aspect. And in business terms, it's also knowing your audience. You might think, oh, this is my audience, but that's got a history. If you look back in the last election, the percentage of vote which went to a particular party or the winning party was 37% of the total that voted. It wasn't even 37% of the entire population. So think of it. You only got 37% of a very small margin of people who voted. If all of these apolitical people decided that this is bullshit and they walked in, I'm 100% certain the opposition would have won the election.
But I want to also just give you another perspective that there have been very tall and at the moment irrational claims made by the CEO or the leader or the prime minister, president, whatever you will, right? And they've made it happen. We'll go to space, we'll land on the moon, they made it happen. So when it does it not increase the value? Isn't it a risk to do it? But if you get there, and what I mean to say is, do you think it could make you legendary if you say that you're going to win by 40 and win by 50?
It can make you legendary if you start from a space of humbleness. But that was missing throughout this whole campaign.
So humility is important.
Humility is very important, right?
Sure.
And that's one of the characteristics of great leader.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure when Kennedy said we'll go to space, that was an audacious statement, not an arrogant statement. Right? And that's the difference.
It was seen as a dream. It inspired.
It wasn't like, that's, and I think that's where the messaging, the way you see, and I think we as message first strategy communication firm, we keep telling our clients, we keep telling people we work with is, how do you craft the message becomes very important, because sender's message and receiver's message is very different. Yeah. So when you said Abki Baar, Paar, it sounded very arrogant to me. And probably a lot of other people.
Maybe it's very hard to stay humble when you don't have a media that opposes you, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that in this election, the channel that should have had the strongest messages going on completely failed to provide a balanced view of the election, right up till the final evening, where the exit polls unanimously declared one side to be winning by a margin which actually got the country to believe. Not just the stock markets, right? And we know what happened after that. When there is an absence of any sort of opposition coming from the media to question you on your facts, figures, data, claims, why are you saying these things, right? Is asking the audience what their real issues are and whether they want to vote for a religious building or they want to vote for roads and schools. This march towards arrogance becomes that much easier, because then you start to fool yourself that I'm going to be able to use these channels the way I want to, right? Sure. And whatever message I put out, there is always going to be one mic around me to take that up and carry it to billions of people.
But it may be a good thing, Shoaib. This is a consequence. I hope that this incident leads to a possibility of media getting better, doing better.
Sure. What did Ravish Kumar say when he won the Access Award?
Oh, that was a beautiful line. Ravish said, but I don't think it was his original line. And he quoted somebody saying, sometimes, not every time is it important to know who won the battle, but it is or to know whether you're going to win a battle. But just being on the battlefield can be the message that somebody was there to fight.
I think we were talking about media, right? It's also very important to see that the landscape of media has changed. While television and print is something that is consumed, there's a lot of online influencer media which is there.
Oh yeah,
right.
And some of them really shone this election, right?
Yeah, they shone. They not only came in center space, but if you have to go through the data that they provided, they reached out to a lot of people.
But that's again authenticity.
Right? They reached out to a lot of people who really started to question the media, right?
Yeah.
We all knew where the media was, right? We all knew what was playing. And when you were talking about they should do this, they should do that, I think there's always, when you find such kind of arrogance coming through, which is not authentic, someone or some place will rise up, which is where the influencers of this generation rose, right? And there was so much online commentary. And that's why I'm going back to the apoliticals. Because a lot of young generation was apolitical. It was these influencers who kind of, made
So,
the world.
I'm one of those people who believe the horoscope more than the news.
Ooh.
I stopped reading that stuff a long time ago. I don't get it. I read it for entertainment and not for knowledge as such. And influencers do provide me that. But I know Meenal, you still read the newspaper. I don't know for entertainment or what. What's your view on this?
No, I think when Mayur was talking about, and there was an interesting part where we all have been mentioning about data, okay? And I'm surprised that the amount of data being used on emotion and opinions, which has been constructed for a benefit of theirs, right? That in itself kind of is a question mark. You cannot skew data based on emotion and opinion. And that I think in itself needs to be changing. I have seen news reports which utilize it. I've seen political leaders who are utilizing it. So I think at the core foundation, the insight of emotional and opinions are somewhere getting deconstructed for the benefit of a certain pocket of audience. And I think that needs to change in itself. The authenticity of the data and what is being controlled there, I think somewhere that's my questioning. Because at the end of the moment, what message we give is basically a product of the patterns which we are consuming through the data, right? So that's where my questioning lies as such.
So when you look at, when we look at consequence of an arrogant message, right?
Yeah.
The consequences are in our face, right? And when we got to pick this topic, it was very close to us because, like, look, we are into message. This is what we want to talk about, and look at this great example, and let's do this on the next day. So we're here.
Yeah.
But then, what's really that we take away? And from what we've been discussing, one of the things is make promises. One, about things you can control. I mean, otherwise it's just I don't know why you would otherwise. Second is humility. So it's the words that you choose. You can be confident and not arrogant, the line that you had, by choosing the right words, by making sure what your delivery is going to look like, what's your tonality going to be. All of these things are very sensitive because you can say the same thing in 10 different ways and look out to be an asshole, or seem that, oh, I'm really behind you, I'm with you, you're the underdog, you're going to win, right? There's ways that messaging can be delivered to get the outcome from people. And that message goes beyond just words, but how you say it and tonality as well. And lastly, also looking at what is it that what's the larger purpose, like you're saying? What is it that you're really trying to create? And are you trying to make an impact? What's the emotional connect? Which goes to authenticity. Because no matter who you are, no matter what your background, educational or whatever, people know when you bullshit.
Yeah.
Authenticity, just people know. I think you're born with it.
Yeah.
My child knows when I bullshit him. Because when I say something like, no, you're not. Like, yeah, got it. Right? I think you're born with this instinct. And for some reason, as we grow into adults, we keep getting so arrogant that we think we can get away with it. First realization is, no, you cannot. People can see through bullshit.
Yeah.
So I think authentic, humble, simple, and controllable incident.
I'll just add one more thing to that.
Yeah.
Is don't make fun of anyone else. You don't know when you'll be in the same situation yourself.
Yeah,
Or even I'll add one thing, don't take your situation for granted. It's not going to be constant.
I'd say listen.
Yeah.
Listen.
first.
Yeah.
Right. I think they stopped listening, which is why they forgot what their audience who loved them for 10 years undisputedly wanted. Right. And those things change. What they wanted in 2014 and then 19 was not necessarily the same in 2024. But you
exemplified by Ayodhya.
Exemplified by Ayodhya. But you stop listening, and this is what happens.
Absolutely. So the consequences of arrogance are heavy. Yeah. So you better be sure if you're going to do it. Who are we to tell anyone what messages they should give? But probably it may be more smarter. Because if you're going to be confident, authentic, honest, simple, then possibly the things that you can get out of a confident message could be the same without carrying the risk of an arrogant message. So, I think at some point of time, we will learn that as we grow as a society. And at some point of time, we'll learn that if you're going to make tall claims, it must happen, or else that's the last tall claim that you're going to make. So before we start shoving on the poker table, let's be sure that we know the hand that's there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shoaib, Mayur, and Meenal for this episode. I think it was a great start. It was really fun. And one of the things that we want to look at this year is start having guests. So stay tuned for what's going to happen on episode 2, because we're going to have a lot more perspectives and a lot more fun. Thank you for season 2 of Consequence of a Message.